Chapter 1. You're excited when she says it. I can see it on you. Your chest lifts a little, your guard drops, and you start mentally rearranging your future around that sentence. I love you. You don't say it out loud, but you treat those words like a receipt, like proof, like something just got locked in. And I'm telling you straight, without cushioning it, without romance, without bitterness, that reaction is exactly how men get blindsided later. Because those words don't mean what you think they mean once you've lived long enough to watch them collapse under pressure. I'm not saying love isn't real. I'm saying the word is cheap. I'm saying the word gets used long before the behavior ever shows up. I'm saying the word is often spoken at the emotional high point, not the moral low point. And if you've never experienced the gap between how passionately someone can say they love you and how quickly they can justify doing something foul to you later, then you're still early in the game. That doesn't make you dumb, it makes you inexperienced. But experience doesn't come gently. It comes by contradiction. By watching words evaporate when things stop feeling good. Every man starts out believing the word. You're supposed to. That's how you bond. That's how you open up. That's how you commit. You hear it and you think, all right, we're on the same page now. You hear it and you relax. You hear it and you stop protecting yourself as much. And nothing bad happens immediately. Everything is good. Everything is always good until it isn't. That's the part nobody warns you about. The fall doesn't come during the honeymoon. It comes later. When convenience fades, when temptation shows up, when resentment starts whispering, when accountability would require restraint instead of emotion. This is where men get confused, because the love felt real when it was said. The eye contact was real, the emotion was real, the tears were real, the promises were real in that moment. And because the moment felt sincere, you assume the future is covered. You assume that whatever comes later will still be filtered through that same love. But love spoken in comfort is untested. Love spoken under pressure is where the truth lives. And most men never separate the two until it's too late. I'm speaking to you directly because I know how this hits. You've probably heard I love you before, maybe more than once. Maybe you've heard it from someone who later did something you still can't fully wrap your head around. Something that didn't match the tenderness, something that didn't match the vows, something that didn't match the way she looked at you when she said those words. And instead of questioning the word, you questioned yourself. You asked what you did wrong. You tried to make sense of how love could coexist with betrayal, disrespect, or cruelty. You assumed love was still there somewhere, and that you just lost access to it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Love as a word doesn't restrain behavior. Character does, values do, discipline does, accountability does. Love without those things is just emotion. And emotion is volatile. Emotion changes. Emotion justifies. Emotion rewrites history when it needs to protect itself. You can love someone and still do them dirty if you don't have an internal code that tells you certain lines don't get crossed, no matter how you feel in the moment. That's the distinction men aren't taught to look for early. They're taught to listen for the word, not to watch for the restraint. I didn't arrive at this perspective by reading quotes or watching videos. I arrived here the hard way. I've been told, I love you, by women who meant it when they said it. Every last one of them did. They weren't lying in that moment, but over time, I watched those same women justify behavior that love should have prevented. Not small things, big things, name-dragging, moving sideways with people they had no business entertaining, acting out in ways that could have caused real damage, all while still claiming love like it was a shield against accountability. And that's when it clicked. Love, when it's only a feeling and not a discipline, doesn't protect anyone. It excuses everything. You don't forget moments like that. You don't come out of them angry forever. You come out observant, quiet, less impressed. You stop getting gassed by words because you've seen how flexible those words can become when someone wants to justify their own impulses. You stop treating declarations as contracts. You start treating them as weather reports, informative but temporary. And that shift scares men who haven't been there yet because they think it sounds cold. It's not cold. It's accurate. The hardest part for men is accepting that someone can genuinely love you and still hurt you without hesitation. That contradiction messes with your sense of reality. It makes you think love is supposed to protect you by default. It doesn't. Love describes a feeling. It doesn't describe a boundary. And boundaries are what keep people from crossing lines when they're emotional, angry, jealous, or tempted. When those boundaries aren't there, love becomes irrelevant the moment discomfort shows up. You see this play out everywhere once you know how to look. People stand in front of families, friends, pastors, whole communities, and swear love publicly. And then when things get ugly, they do whatever benefits them most privately. They rewrite the narrative. They justify the damage. They convince themselves they're still the good person because they once felt something deeply. That's not rare. That's common. And men who don't understand that distinction keep getting emotionally blindsided because they think love is a guarantee instead of a variable. I'm not telling you to stop believing in love. I'm telling you to stop worshiping the word. There's a difference. Belief keeps you open. Worship makes you blind. When you worship the word, you ignore the behavior. You excuse the patterns. You downplay the red flags because you think the word overrides everything else. And then when the behavior finally contradicts the word so violently that you can't ignore it anymore, the damage is already done. Financially, emotionally, legally, spiritually. Sometimes all four. This is why men who've lived through enough contradictions don't react the way you do anymore. They don't jump when they hear it. They don't build castles in their head off a sentence. They nod, they observe, they stay present. They wait to see what happens when things get uncomfortable. Because that's where love either proves itself or exposes itself. And that patience isn't bitterness, it's earned restraint. If this feels unsettling, that's good. It should. It means you're actually listening instead of romanticizing. And if you've already lived through a version of this, if you've already watched words collapse under pressure, you're probably nodding quietly right now. You don't need convincing, you just needed someone to say it without trying to sound enlightened or wounded. If that's you, hit like on this video. The mistake men make is thinking maturity means becoming less emotional. It doesn't. Maturity means becoming less naive. You can still feel deeply. You can still connect. You can still open up. You just don't hand over the keys because someone says the right sentence with the right tone. You wait. You watch. You see how they move when love would require sacrifice instead of excitement. That's when you learn what the word actually weighs in their life. I'm talking to you like this because nobody talked to me like this early. Everybody sold the fantasy. Everybody said love conquers all. Nobody explained that love without integrity conquers nothing. Nobody explained that the people who hurt you the worst often swear they loved you the whole time. Nobody explained that loving you and protecting you are two different things. And once you understand that, you stop being shocked when words and actions diverge. You start measuring the right thing. If you're still here, still listening, stay with me. The next chapter goes deeper into why men get so attached to the word in the first place and how that attachment gets exploited over and over again. And if you want to keep developing discernment instead of learning everything the hard way, subscribe. Not because this is entertaining, but because it's honest. And honesty is cheaper to learn here than it is out there. Chapter 2. You don't realize how attached you are to the word until you notice how quickly it disarms you, how it short-circuits your instincts, how it makes you overlook behavior you'd never tolerate from someone who hadn't said it. That's not because you're weak. It's because the word has been mythologized for you since you were young. Movies, music, religion, culture all wrap that sentence in finality. Say it and everything changes. Say it and you're supposed to be safe. Say it and the work is done. And because you want that safety, you treat the word like a finish line instead of a starting point. Men aren't taught to interrogate love. They're taught to chase it, to earn it, to prove themselves worthy of it. So when a woman says she loves you, it feels like confirmation that the chase is over, that the work paid off, that you've arrived somewhere solid. And that's exactly why the word has so much leverage over you. Because it's not just a feeling, it's validation, it's relief, it's the promise that you don't have to keep auditioning anymore. And when someone understands that power, consciously or unconsciously, they can use it to lower your guard. This is where things start going wrong for men, not because women are evil, but because men don't separate emotional expression from moral commitment. Saying, "I love you," expresses a feeling. It doesn't promise restraint. It doesn't promise loyalty under pressure. It doesn't promise accountability when emotions shift. Those things come from character, not chemistry. But chemistry is louder. It's more exciting. It feels like proof. And because it feels like proof, you stop looking for the quieter signals that actually determine how someone will behave when love becomes inconvenient. You've probably noticed this without naming it. The way some people can be incredibly affectionate and still incredibly reckless. The way tenderness and selfishness can exist in the same person without canceling each other out. That contradiction feels impossible when you're younger. You think love should override bad behavior. You think if someone loves you enough, they won't cross certain lines. But that belief only holds if the person's internal standards are stronger than their impulses. And most people aren't taught to build internal standards. They're taught to follow feelings. That's why the word love travels so freely. It's easy to say. It costs nothing in the moment. It feels good to express. It bonds people quickly, and it creates plausible deniability later. Because when behavior gets questioned, the person can fall back on the feeling. I loved you. I still love you. I didn't mean to hurt you. Love becomes the defense instead of the standard. And men who don't understand this keep mistaking emotional expression for ethical commitment. They think the feeling guarantees the behavior. It doesn't. What makes this especially dangerous for men is that you're encouraged to be sincere while others are encouraged to be expressive. You say what you mean what you say. When you say, "I love you," you're usually attaching intention to it, protection, provision, loyalty, effort. You're not just describing a feeling, you're making an internal vow, even if you don't articulate it that way. So when you hear the same words back, you assume the same internal process happened on the other side. And that assumption is where the trap closes. Most men don't realize how asymmetrical this exchange can be. For you, love is a responsibility. For her, it may be a feeling. Neither is wrong. But confusing the two creates chaos. You start operating on the expectation that love means certain lines won't be crossed. She may be operating on the belief that love exists independently of her behavior. So when conflict hits, when temptation appears, when emotions spike, she doesn't feel constrained the way you would. And when you confront that gap, you're shocked. Not because she's acting out of character, but because you misunderstood what the word meant in her internal world. This is why men who've been through enough stop reacting to declarations. They don't scoff. They don't mock. They don't get cynical. They simply decouple words from trust. Trust becomes something earned through consistency, not granted through emotion. And that shift feels harsh at first because it forces you to stay alert longer. You can't relax just because the right sentence was said. You have to observe. You have to wait. You have to see how someone behaves when loving you requires sacrifice instead of enthusiasm. That patience feels unnatural if you've been trained to believe the word is the finish line. There's also an ego component men don't like to admit. Being told, "I love you," feels like winning. It feels like you were chosen. It Feels like you mattered enough to inspire deep feeling. And when that gets taken away later or contradicted by behavior, it feels like a personal failure, like you misjudged yourself, like you weren't enough. That pain keeps men hooked on the word because they want to avoid feeling foolish again. They want reassurance that this time it's real, that this time it will last. And ironically, that desire makes them even more vulnerable to believing too early. You can see how this plays out in how men defend women who say they love them but act recklessly. He'll say things like, "She was emotional," or "she didn't mean it," or "she was hurt." He becomes the translator, the apologist, the historian of her intentions. Meanwhile, nobody is translating his pain. Nobody is contextualizing the damage done to him. The love she felt becomes more important than the harm she caused. And men accept that imbalance because they've been taught that love excuses all sins. It doesn't. It explains feelings. It doesn't erase consequences. This is why you have to stop asking whether someone loves you and start asking whether they are capable of protecting what they claim to love. Those are not the same question. One is emotional, the other is structural. One asks how someone feels in the moment. The other asks who they are when feelings fluctuate. And feelings always fluctuate. That's guaranteed. What's not guaranteed is how someone handles themselves when they're angry, jealous, bored, tempted, or embarrassed. That's where the truth lives. And words don't operate there. Habits do. Men who don't learn this lesson early often learn it expensively, not just emotionally, but materially. Because they assume love will restrain behavior that it never restrained before. They assume declarations will override incentives. They assume affection will outpace resentment. And when it doesn't, they're left picking up pieces, wondering how someone who claimed to love them could do what they did. The answer is simpler than it feels. Love wasn't the governing force. Convenience was. Emotion was. Self-interest was. And love as a word didn't have the authority to stop any of it. This doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become precise. You stop letting the word rush the process. You stop letting it override your discernment. You let it exist without letting it dictate your trust. That's a hard balance to strike, especially if you're wired to bond deeply. But it's necessary if you want to stop confusing intensity with safety. You can appreciate the feeling without surrendering your boundaries to it. You can receive affection without assuming it comes with accountability baked in. You might be realizing now why older men seem less impressed by romance and more focused on consistency. It's not because they don't feel. It's because they've felt enough to know how unreliable feelings can be when they're not anchored to principle. They're not jaded. They're calibrated. They know that love set in comfort tells you very little. Love upheld in conflict tells you everything. And conflict doesn't mean screaming matches. It means moments where someone could justify hurting you and chooses not to. Those moments are rare. Those moments reveal character. Those moments matter more than any declaration ever will. If this is unsettling you, that's good. It means you're separating fantasy from function. If you've ever been hurt by someone who swore they loved you, you're not alone, and you're not stupid for believing them. You did what you were taught to do. The difference now is that you don't have to keep repeating the lesson. You can evolve from it. And if this chapter is helping you articulate something you felt but never named, share the video. Not to warn others dramatically, but to normalize discernment in a culture that romanticizes blindness. Stay with me, because the next chapter cuts into the part most men resist the hardest. Why this word still has power over you even after it's betrayed you, and how to take that power back without becoming bitter, closed off, or afraid to connect again. Chapter 3. What keeps the word powerful even after it's burned? You isn't hope. It's identity. That's the part most men miss. You don't cling to "I love you" because you're romantic. You cling to it because somewhere along the way, your sense of being chosen got tied to your sense of being worthy. So when the word shows up, it doesn't just feel good. It feels like confirmation that you're finally enough. Enough to relax. Enough to stop proving. Enough to believe the work paid off. And once your worth gets tied to that sentence, it doesn't matter how many times it fails you. You'll keep wanting it to mean what you hoped it meant the first time. This is why men who've been hurt before can still get disarmed by the same words again. They tell themselves they're smarter now, more experienced, more guarded. But the reaction still hits the body before the mind catches up. The chest loosens, the shoulders drop. The future starts forming quietly in the background. And you hate that about yourself because you thought you were past it. You thought experience would make you immune. But experience doesn't erase wiring. It just gives you the chance to rewire if you're willing to sit with the discomfort instead of chasing relief. Relief is the trap. I love you offers instant relief. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from effort. Relief from vigilance. It tells you that you can finally stop watching so closely, that you can finally trust, that you can finally exhale. And when you've been carrying emotional weight for a long time, that relief feels intoxicating. It feels earned. It feels deserved. And because it feels deserved, you don't want to question it. You don't want to say, okay, but what does this actually change? You don't want to slow it down. You want to enjoy the moment where everything feels aligned. That's human. That's not weakness. But it is dangerous if you confuse relief with security. Security isn't a feeling, it's a pattern. It's what happens when someone consistently chooses behavior that protects the bond, even when it costs them something. Relief happens in a sentence. Security happens over time. And men who don't separate those two keep getting shocked when the relief fades and nothing underneath it is solid. They thought the word built something. It didn't. It just covered the cracks temporarily. This is where you take the power back, and it's not by becoming numb. It's by changing what the word unlocks in you. Instead of letting it lower your standards, it should raise your curiosity. Instead of letting it end the process, it should begin observation. Instead of letting it mean, I'm safe now, it should mean, okay, now I watch how you move when things get hard. That shift alone changes everything. You don't argue with the word. You don't dismiss it. You simply don't give it authority it hasn't earned yet. Most men give authority away too early. They treat declarations like credentials, like access passes, like something that entitles the speaker to deeper trust without deeper evidence. And when that trust gets violated later, the pain isn't just from what happened. It's from realizing you handed over power prematurely. You let a sentence outrank a pattern. You let emotion outrank consistency. And that realization can sting worse than the original betrayal because it feels like you betrayed yourself first. You don't fix that by hardening. You fix it by becoming exact. Exact about what earns access to you. Exact about what relaxes you. Exact about what you treat as meaningful. Precision is not cold. Precision is respectful. It respects your time, your energy, your future. When someone says they love you and you don't immediately reorganize your life around it, that doesn't make you distant. It makes you grounded. It means you're no longer letting words fast-forward intimacy past its foundation. There's also something men rarely admit. Being impressed by the word makes you easier to manipulate, even unintentionally. When someone knows that saying the right thing buys them forgiveness, patience, or access, they're more likely to use it when it benefits them. Not always maliciously, often reflexively. Because they've learned that the word works. It calms you. It resets you. It makes you second-guess your boundaries. And if you don't change how you respond to it, you're training people how to bypass your discernment without realizing it. This is why watching behavior after the word matters more than before it. Anyone can say it when things feel good. The real question is what changes once it's said. Does effort increase or decrease? Does accountability tighten or loosen? Does respect deepen or erode? Does restraint become more consistent or more conditional? Those answers tell you whether the word carries weight in that person's internal system or whether it's just emotional punctuation. And you don't need to confront or accuse to find out. You just observe, calmly, quietly, without rushing to interpret every fluctuation as a verdict. Men struggle with this because patience feels like withholding. It feels like you're not reciprocating enough. It feels unfair. But fairness isn't about matching words with words. Fairness is about matching trust with evidence. You can still be present. You can still be kind. You can still be open. You just don't let a sentence override your standards. You don't let it turn off your awareness. You let it exist alongside discernment instead of replacing it. This also reframes why you felt foolish in the past. You weren't foolish for believing. You were just operating with incomplete information. Nobody taught you to distinguish emotional sincerity from ethical reliability. Nobody explained that someone can mean what they say and still not be able to live in alignment with it. Nobody explained that love without discipline collapses the moment discipline is required. Once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself for believing and start adjusting how you verify. Verification doesn't mean testing people cruelly. It means paying attention when there's nothing to gain. It means noticing how someone handles disappointment, how they talk about people they're angry with, how they behave when accountability would cost them something. Those moments reveal more about the weight of their love than any declaration ever could. And when you start trusting those signals more than words, you stop being surprised later. Surprises turn into confirmations instead of shocks. You may notice that once you change how you respond to the word, fewer people rush to say it. And that's not a loss, that's a filter. People who relied on the word to secure access will feel less effective. People who live their values won't feel threatened at all. They'll understand the pace. They'll respect the boundary. They won't need the word to do the heavy lifting because their behavior already does. That distinction saves you years if you let it. There's a quiet confidence that comes from not being easily impressed, not cynical, not closed, just measured. You're no longer starving for reassurance. You're no longer building expectations off emotion alone. You're allowing trust to grow where it's supported instead of forced. And that confidence doesn't make you distant. It makes you steady. Steadiness attracts people who value stability over drama and repels people who need chaos to feel alive. If you're listening to this and realizing how much power you used to give away with that one sentence, sit with that. Don't judge yourself. Just notice. Notice how often you relaxed your boundaries too soon. Notice how often you ignored behavior because the word was present. Awareness alone begins to shift the pattern. And if this chapter is helping you see where the leverage really is, like the video, not because it flatters you, but because it sharpens you, we're not done yet. The next chapter brings this home by answering the question men avoid once they stop worshiping the word. If love doesn't mean what you thought it meant, what should you actually look for instead? What replaces the word as your signal? What tells you you're safe without requiring blind faith? That's where this all lands. And that's where discernment finally turns into peace instead of paranoia. Chapter 4. Once you stop letting the word decide anything for you, a different signal starts to matter, and it's quieter than you expect. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel cinematic. It doesn't spike your emotions or give you that rush you used to confuse with certainty. What replaces the word isn't another word at all. It's relief, the absence of tension, the absence of confusion, the absence of that low-grade anxiety you've carried in every relationship where you were hoping someone would eventually become who you needed them to be. You feel it when you don't have to translate behavior anymore, when you don't have to interpret mixed signals or explain away inconsistencies, when what someone says lines up with what they do so consistently that you stop checking. That's the signal. Not love as a declaration, but alignment as a pattern. And most men don't trust that at first because it doesn't feel dramatic enough. It doesn't feel earned. It feels too calm, too clean, too undemanding. And because chaos trained you to believe intensity equals meaning, calm feels suspicious until you realize how much energy you've been wasting living without it. This is where discernment finally turns into peace instead of paranoia. You're no longer scanning for betrayal. You're no longer bracing for impact. You're no longer waiting for the other shoe to drop. Not because you're naive again, but because the environment no longer requires vigilance. The woman in front of you isn't testing your tolerance. She's not probing your boundaries. She's not waiting for an opening to justify something later. She's simply consistent. And consistency doesn't excite men who are used to emotional roller coasters, but it stabilizes men who are ready to build something that lasts longer than a feeling. You realize how different your body feels in this dynamic. Your jaw isn't clenched. Your shoulders aren't tight. You're not rehearsing conversations in your head. You're not editing yourself to avoid conflict. You're not bargaining internally about whether to bring something up or let it slide. You speak plainly. You're heard plainly. And disagreements don't feel like threats to the entire relationship. They feel like moments to be navigated, not survived. That's not romance movie love. That's adult love. And adult love doesn't need to announce itself constantly to feel real. This is when you understand why the word stopped impressing you. Not because you don't believe in love, but because you finally experienced something stronger than the word itself. You experienced safety. Safety from being blindsided. Safety from having your trust used against you. And once you've had that, words feel secondary. They're nice. They're welcome. But they're no longer decisive. They're descriptive at best. The real decision gets made by behavior over time, not by emotion in a moment. You also notice how your standards become simpler, not higher in an arrogant way. You're not asking for perfection. You're not demanding constant reassurance. You're not chasing intensity. You're asking one basic question and letting it answer itself. Do I feel at ease here? Do I feel respected here? Do I feel like myself here? Those questions cut through everything. And when the answer is yes consistently, you don't need grand declarations to convince you you're in something real. The reality speaks for itself, quietly, day after day. This clarity changes how you move in every area of life, not just relationships. You stop making decisions based on hope and start making them based on evidence. You stop romanticizing potential and start honoring patterns. You stop confusing emotional highs with alignment, and that shift doesn't make you colder. It makes you calmer. Calm enough to choose deliberately instead of reactively. Calm enough to walk away early instead of explaining yourself late. Calm enough to trust what you observe instead of what you're promised. You might notice fewer people rush intimacy with you now. Fewer dramatic confessions, fewer big words early, and that's not because you're less attractive. It's because you're no longer rewarding intensity without substance. People who rely on words to move fast feel the resistance immediately. People who rely on consistency don't. They're comfortable with the pace. They don't need to accelerate the bond artificially. They're willing to let it build. That difference filters your life automatically without you having to confront anyone or declare rules. There's also a quiet grief that comes with this stage. Grief for the years you spent believing the word would save you. Grief for the times you ignored your instincts because someone said the right thing at the right moment. Grief for the versions of yourself that stayed longer than they should have because you were holding onto a sentence instead of watching a pattern. Let that grief pass. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you learned. And learning changes how you choose next time, not how you punish yourself for the past. This is where you finally understand the difference between love as a feeling and love as a structure. Feelings rise and fall. Structures hold under weight. A relationship built on feeling alone collapses the moment weight is applied. A relationship built on structure can absorb emotion without breaking. Structure isn't cold, It's protective. It's what allows feeling to exist without destroying the people inside it. And the woman who brings structure into your life won't need to convince you she loves you constantly. You'll feel it in how steady everything becomes around her. You don't need to explain this to anyone. You don't need to announce your standards. You don't need to argue with people who still worship the word. Let them. Everyone learns at their own pace. What matters is that you don't give authority back to something that hasn't earned it. You let words exist. You enjoy them when they come. But you don't reorganize your life around them. You wait for the pattern, you trust the pattern, you move accordingly. At this point, love doesn't feel like something you're chasing or proving. It feels like something you're allowing once the conditions are right. And that's a completely different posture than the one you started with years ago. You're not defensive. You're not closed. You're just exact. Exact about what earns your trust. Exact about what relaxes you. Exact about what stays in your life long term. That exactness is what keeps you from repeating the same lesson with different faces. If you're listening to this and realizing how much calmer you feel just imagining this kind of dynamic, that's your body telling you something your mind resisted for a long time. You don't want louder love. You want safer love. You don't want bigger words. You want better behavior. You don't want intensity. You want integrity. And once you name that honestly, you stop settling for declarations that don't translate into protection, respect, and restraint. This is where the story ends, not with cynicism, but with clarity. Love didn't lose its meaning. You just stopped confusing the word for the thing itself. And that shift is what saves you from being impressed too early, trusting too fast, and getting blindsided too often. If this video helped you recalibrate what you listen for and what you wait to see, like it. Not because it was entertaining, but because it was grounding. And if you want to keep developing discernment that leads to peace instead of paranoia, subscribe. Because once you stop worshiping words and start respecting patterns, love stops being a gamble and starts being a choice you make with your eyes open.